The most important change in the history of college football was the rule allowing unlimited substitutions. Anybody who has played soccer management games like Football Manager knows that most of the world runs on limited substitutions. In fact, American football originally had limited substitution rules, just like baseball. Now, in the old days, most substitutions took place at the end of the quarter. To speed up the game, football eventually allowed injured players to return to the game. This rule change came about in 1910, allowing players to return to the game at the beginning of a subsequent quarter. This is because dazed and injured players used to stay on the field, refusing to be substituted out. That led to long delays, and there were clear safety threats. College football used to be crazy. I mean, you think it's violent today, but the truth is that the violence of the sport has largely been mollified by things like the forward pass and the various substitution rules over the years. If you were going to go back to watch a game in like 1894, you would be shocked at the violence and how much punishment these guys would take. Back in those days, players played both ways and would frequently play all 60 minutes of the game. This led to players who specialized in multiple areas. For example, Johnny Lujack of the 1946 Notre Dame Fighting Irish was one of those three tool star players. He could run, pass, and kick, and was a defensive back as well. The concept of platooning changed the very complexion of football. You wouldn't see 350-pound linemen in the 1930s simply because men that large couldn't play the entire game. While platooning has made the sport safer, it has also resulted in specialization, as well as all sorts of health risks. It was World War II that caused the change in substitution rules. Now, all sports were negatively impacted by the draft and the war, and as a result, college football rosters became quite small. Because of this, the NCAA Rules Committee decided in early 1941 to allow for unlimited substitutions whenever the ball was dead. It didn't last forever, actually. The NCAA eventually went back to limited substitutions in 1953. Now, you and I have both grown up in the modern age of football. In fact, I would be shocked if anybody watching these videos remembers college football before 1941. Or if anybody even remembers the many substitution controversies of the 1950s and the early 1960s. Now, if you remember that, by all means, leave me a comment down below. But for most of us, this is strange and uncharted territory. In fact, if you're like me, you probably wonder why in the world they would want to get rid of unlimited substitution. The answer? It puts small colleges at a huge disadvantage. Small schools that maybe had enough players to go too deep at every position, simply couldn't keep up with the big schools. Over 50 colleges dropped football in the early 1950s due to cost issues, and that is why the NCAA did what it did. In fact, we're playing against one of those schools today. The University of Detroit fielded an independent football team in 1946. Now, the University of Detroit today is known as University of Detroit Mercy due to its sponsorship by the Jesuits and the Sisters of Mercy. It's got a student body of about 5,000, which really isn't far from where it was in 1946. Now, you would be surprised at the success that a team at such a small school had. The Detroit Titans went undefeated in 1928, for example. They only allowed 27 points all season. Detroit also played well in 1946. They compiled a 6-4 record. This included a big win against Tulsa, who were ranked 20th in the nation at the time. In other words, this wasn't some podunk team that nobody had ever heard of. And you can imagine what it was like in the old days. Old formations like the single wing allowed teams that were at a disadvantage in size and depth to compete with the big boys. If you had one or two really good athletes in the backfield, you could play with the best of them. In fact, if you go to a bunch of smaller high school games today, you'll see the same strategy at work. As romantic as all of that is, though, I don't think Detroit will do much against Notre Dame today. The computer kept changing quarterbacks, shifting between Malinowski and Kurkowski from play to play. Well, I'm not sure if that's realistic or not, but in the end, it doesn't really matter. Detroit only attempted 14 passes all game anyway. Johnny Lujack fumbled early, something he did a few times against Michigan last week. But he made up for it here. I wanted him to pass, but that works too. Lujack did throw an interception, though. One play later, Detroit had tied the score. Didn't I tell you we shouldn't underestimate them? Jim Mello gave us a big run here. And then Lujack decided to run once again and fumbled. Detroit ball. This is going to drive me nuts. We decided to try a few tricks. We did eventually score again after a simple pass. And then we started to make it look easy. But be careful. I'm not sure how this happened. Then Detroit scored again. However, we were able to get our fourth touchdown minutes later, making it 28-13. Now, one of the really interesting things about 1946 is how nobody can kick field goals. It means you've really got a hard decision to make when you're at the 35-yard line. We were at the 33 here and decided to go for it on fourth down. Might as well, since there's no room to punt the ball. And we failed. We did score again, however. We were able to add another touchdown when Lujack was picked off again. We came awfully close to scoring a safety here. Another fumble for us, but we recovered. And then Sitko caught the pass to make it 42-13. Finally, Brennan added on a touchdown, making it 49-13. Even Detroit's big runs weren't quite big enough to do damage. And so we won this game easily, 49-13. We gained 446 yards on the ground and 144 in the air, and all of that on only 15 pass attempts. Detroit had 167 yards rushing and didn't complete a single pass. Well, I'm not so sure how happy I am with this win considering all of our turnovers. We fumbled the ball 4 times and we threw 2 interceptions. But I guess a win is a win no matter how it comes.